Welcome to the Reflections podcast. I'm Ken Boa with Reflections Ministries.
And I'm Stuart McAllister, also with Reflections Ministries.
Lovely to be with you, and we're going to be talking about something that's very critical today that I think relates to the heart of the whole vitality of the spiritual life in terms of moving from the heart to the head to the hands. And so we've often talked about this whole idea of loving well, what it means to have that interior life. And then of learning well, to have the mind that actually helps us to process, that it gives us a vision of a flourishing and fruitful, a clear worldview, so that we understand those questions of culture, of apologetics, and then the living well, that aspect of actual practice and so forth. And so we're looking at all three of those in one respect with this talk.
Yeah, and I think one of the desires of the heart is to try to find ways to make our Christianity accessible and practical and real. I think one of the things I noticed, Ken, with a lot of people, friends that I've walked with for many years, who can't seem to translate their Christian life into meaningful practices, and not, just by having some kind of a ritualistic habits, but actually hearing God. So like praying and learning to pray, for many people, there's always the excuse, it's a mystery, it's a burden, it's a techniques and all this kind of thing. But oftentimes it's that not desiring to or being able to commune with God in the first place.
That's correct.
So help us to think about that. You've done an awful lot, I would say, and more than many, in writing and producing tools. Why do you do that? Why did you come up with these? Why do you see this so important to do handbooks to prayer, handbooks to renewal, these ways to study the Bible?
Yes.
Why?
Well, I'm convinced that the three things that really animate our growth is going to be the Word of God, our exposure to the Word from a biblical perspective. Secondly, it's going to be our response to it in prayer as a communication with God. But the third is suffering. And that the three, so that integrating the Word of God, and then finding a handbook to prayer, for example, or renewal, finding ways of how do I integrate the Word and prayer so that they become a kind of a synergistic union.
I love that picture. So you've got something going in my mind there. So you were saying that, okay, so there's the Word of God. So there's an importance of knowing and being able and getting to understand and continue to know the Bible, this narrative, its promises. But then you said, and then that's teaching us to pray. But then you said about suffering, and that those acting synergistically, there's an interaction of those three things. So because some people think, oh, well, if I'm praying and I'm claiming the promises, I shouldn't be suffering.
Shouldn't be suffering at all. So this notion that we have that somehow God is some kind of a utility for our purposes, that we can use him and give us the answers we want. Again, we want to be a cosmic vending machine there, where we just put in the right amount and we then suppose that if we made this promise, he made this promise, we're going to claim it. And I think that's a dangerous approach to take, because it's almost like kind of sympathetic magic. You do this part, God's about. No. It's all about him. And it's about, I think the suffering, in my view, is to submit and surrender my idea of what my best interests look like and to receive what he is giving me, because that's a death. That's a crucifixion.
That's a big one. Because that's I think that's part of the thing that I think many people struggle with, including myself. We all, so you're saying when something happens, when bad things happen to good people, in our mind, I'm good, sorry, but I immediately ask why. So when you're telling a story of suffering, you're telling someone got cancer, someone broke their leg, they were in a car crash, they lost their money in the stock market, they lost their job. And even if they're being devout Christians, most times the automatic response, and I think that just comes from the human part, is why?
Yeah.
I didn't deserve this.
Yes.
Why is this happening?
Yes.
And are you saying God actually allows that? Not only allows it, but maybe means it?
Yes. This is, I like to put it this way, that God redeems what he allows, but it also takes, really restoration requires wreckage. So if I'm going to be restored, it means that I have to be willing then to be moved from where my tidy views of what life is about are, and then to embrace what God's vision, a better good, a better image of what my best goods really look like. Because I'm clueless. If I truly admit that I don't know anything about what my best interests look like, I think I do. And I argue with God about that. And I'm not in control even if I were. That's a hard thing then for me to resist. I still want to have a why, but he's saying, you won't understand my answer.
I think that's part of the mystery right there, Ken. I've heard you say that several times, and I've often, I try to think it through in my own life and friends that I'm talking to, but this idea that something in being human, when something goes wrong, is you keep trying to figure it out, right? We're trying to figure it out. So, and if I'm a Christian, I layer on the Bible promises, deliverance, spiritual warfare, all these things. And still you're left often with a huge unknown, an unexpected, and an unwanted.
That's correct.
So something unknown is breaking into my experience. Something unwanted is damaging my life. And it's completely something else. So I can't control it. And that desire to imagine that, but then I'm still trying to say, well, but God is sovereign.
Yes, he's sovereign.
So what does that look like then?
So this is how do we turn anxiety into peace? And this is what I've been reflecting on of late. We all are familiar with the Philippians 4, 6-7, be anxious for nothing, and how that relates then to how it affects not only our spiritual self, or our sense of the why and so forth, but letting loose of an anxiety and submitting it to him, but then moving it from there into the next part of that text, which has to do with my thinking and the renewing of my mind, and then with my doing, with the things you've learned and heard and seen me practice. I was struck by Philippians 4, 6-7, really do talk about that whole idea of letting it go, and it's the spiritual depth. And then Philippians 4:8 talks about my renewing of mind so I can see it clearly. And then Philippians 4:9 talks me about how I can now put it into practice. So yeah.
Tell us an illustration from your life, because, again, I have, as a preacher, speaker, I have used that verse many times. Yes. We all have. And, it's great when we're talking about anxiety, and yet life keeps bringing back those anxieties, ones that are always bigger. So tell us how you have actually done that. I mean, you're at this stage in life, Ken, there's a lot going on, I know, and aging and looking at life and health issues and friends around us passing on. What does that look like for you?
Yes, because life becomes not simpler, but more complex in many ways. But at the same time, if we are truly immersing ourselves in God's word, getting his perspective, we'll begin to see it that it's far more nuanced, and that we will not get the simplistic answers of the why, but the what, the who. And so it comes down for me to a matter of who am I trusting rather than why is this happening? And that becomes the real purpose of Philippians 4, 6-7 as I see it. That text we could talk
Glenn
about that.
Sunshine, when we're talking about what was that phrase he used about negative faith and fear? There was something very powerful. Remember, recently we were talking.
Yes, we were talking
Glenn
about that.
said
idea.
Something about that if you're not trusting God, it's like you're putting your trust in the thing you're fearing.
Yes. It's essentially the opposite of Philippians. So be anxious for nothing, and so it's very interesting. The
Being
contrast.
anxious for everything.
And not for a few things, but for nothing. And but then the contrast of but in everything with prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. I find it fascinating because first of all, he says prayer and supplication with thanksgiving requests is 4 different words for prayer. So the whole matter is to take that thing that's giving you anxiety because it's not the way you want it to be. And how do I then take that and leverage that force and give it back to God is what I think that text is inviting me to do.
Prayer and supplication. And again, can you give me an example? Just recently,
let me give you an example of that from me. So there's an awful lot of things that are going on, that always go on, that are contrary to our expectations or to our desires because we have a certain plan or chronos, and we have our plans that we make. But then God's kairos opportunities, these interruptions, which are really invitations, are needed. You need to die to your idea of what that looks like and receive his. So instead of fretting and being anxious, when I have some burden that's coming down on me, my task is to give it back to him. And everything, prayer and supplication, let your request be made known to God, and then the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your hearts and minds. Well, that's an incredibly interesting thought. I think we can habituate ourselves to taking, whenever we have a burden, our emotions tell us, why am I struck down? Why am I disappointed? Why am I in despair? That's a reminder. Give it back to him. You were not meant to carry that. So then you can train yourself and habituate yourself to keep giving it back to him. And after a while, it stays more there than it is down here.
Is there a sense, though? So we live in a very psychologized world.
Yes, we do.
And we live in a world that tells us, I've got to get fixed now. I've got to be happy. But because behind all of that, there's an awful lot of assumptions that I think are true, but may not be known to many, which is, I have to have a belief that God is, that we're in the world is created. I have to have a belief that he is good. I have to have a belief and a conviction that he cares for me. And despite what's going on, there's also a plan that even in this chaos, in this brokenness, in this darkness, in this sickness, in this betrayal, he is still present, and that he can redeem this in some way towards his good, because there is a higher plan here. Yes. There's something, I may not know the details, I may never know the details, but the idea of transferring my trust towards trying to figure out the why and demanding an explanation, towards seeking comfort and putting my hope in him. Lord, I don't know how you're going to save me, but save me.
Yes.
Kind of thing.
So what I'm really doing then is affirming that I cannot answer the questions of life, that why this is happening, as opposed to why this has happened to another person or to me. But what I can do is to take that, and with prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, the hard thanksgiving, even, and this is the hardest thing for all of us, to thank him for something you don't want. Mm-hmm. And yet, if you are convinced that he works all things together for good, which means in concert, not in isolation, to those who love him are called according to his purpose. I have to believe then he's going to work this together in such a way that it'll lead to a greater outcome than what I myself had tried to engineer.
Yeah, but that point there, the engineering, I have been trained, I have been habituated as a Westerner, a Scot, but now an American. But I am trained through the television. I'm trained through to come up with a plan, come up with to understand this, to read the latest psychology. So to find someone to blame, it's the economy stupid, it's the president stupid, or it's the stupid president, depending who's actually talking, or some kind of version of this. So we're looking always for cause and effects in a closed system.
Yes.
And really, we're talking about cause and effects in an open system, because if God is in charge, he can intervene and he can overrule. But I may not get either control or comprehension.
In fact, control is an illusion. I never was in control. I have the illusion of control. But 1 inch here, 1 second there can make a life and death situation. I can't control that. But the other part is that I don't even know what my best interests look like.
And that's the point, Ken. That's what I wanted to zero in a bit. Is the demand, being modern people in the information world, is the demand itself for comprehension one of the torments? Because the fact is, there's stuff we don't know, there's stuff we can't know, there's stuff we will not know. Yeah. But if we have made the Enlightenment rational idea that you can explore, you can find, go to the dictionaries, go to Wikipedia, Google it for goodness sake. And yet we do all the above, and all we've got is a bunch of facts that still do not give us a coherent whole. Yeah. And we can't get it.
Yes.
So we're living with this perpetual torment in my soul, in hunger for answers, an answer for explanation, my demand for harmony and wholeness. And yet you're saying there is the big story, trust me.
In a person. So it's looking beyond the facts to the person. And so when I realize I'll never understand even the fringe of his ways, certainly that's true in the entire created order. Certainly I'll not understand him in the spiritual way either. And therefore, my call isn't so much to understand him, but to look to him. Is this someone worthy of my trust? Can I trust him? And do I have a history where he's actually demonstrated that he's trustworthy? Then I can have a secure basis, an anchor of the soul, where I can offer up my anxieties and give them to him, because I was never meant to bear that burden.
So you're not saying that faith is blind, though. You're saying, but you are saying, or at least I think we're saying, that faith has to go into the uncertain. It has to trust what we don't know in order to live with also what we don't know.
Yes. Right? So we have to trust what he's revealed in the light it gives us an understanding. Who is this one? Well, we see who he is, and insofar as he pursued us, wooed us, and drew us to himself as the sacred romancer of our soul. We know that. Is that someone that I can love and trust, even though I don't understand him? And the answer, of course, is yes. And the idea then, how do I move into trusting him? It is by taking my concerns to him, leaving them there. He says, and you were not supposed to carry that. And I will give you in return my peace, which transcends comprehension. That would be a great arrangement to have.
In my ongoing discussions at times over life I remember particularly with the new atheist stuff came up with Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, and I went and listened to Hitchens in Alabama, a debate organized by a friend. And I actually have, as you have, spent a lot of time with the free thinkers. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because for them, it's unless we could make God and the order of the universe rationally explicable in full terms that they designate, then we could not. In other words, I must know before I would trust. Yes. Why would you trust? And we're saying yet Anselm and Augustine, faith-seeking understanding.
Yes,
there comes an encounter, and a lot of people who had an experience of God, that begins it, and then their journey. Now they do still have questions, but it wasn't the order the new atheists were suggesting of knowing.
Yeah, it's a question of finitude. It's a question of the finite trying to grasp the transfinite, the eternal, the ineffable. And so this understanding that God is mysterious, he's beyond us. And so thus the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Then to transfer my trust from my own ineffective ways, because I can't control a thing, to him who is in control of all things. Even though I don't have a change of circumstances, I can have a change of perspective that goes from fear or anxiety to faith, which means peace, which is an amazing concept.
Now you've done a lot deeper dive than many people in terms of the scientific things and the cosmos. You're not threatened. You're not thrown off by any of the new scientific breakthroughs or any of the new sociological or psychological understandings. Do you find any of them as saying, "Oh, that puts my Christian faith"? Because there's a popular trend on these days of all these post-evangelicals and this person who finally got up and it's not true. You've had as much experience, both good and bad, of life.
Yes.
So you're not threatened by any of these things?
No.
You're not thrown to doubt?
Well, one of the things about this, we're invited to doubt and to question, but that's really to discern, am I putting my feet on the solid rock of God's unchanging character and promises, or on the sand, the quicksand of human aspirations and opinions? But my view is in the marketplace of ideas, the Christian worldview. It comports much better with reality. It's more consistent, clear, comprehensive, and coherent than anything down. So I have the issue then is, again, as I've often put it, the heart cannot rejoice in what the mind rejects. And so I have to have a clarity of that. But still, my mind tells me I'll never understand his ways.
So there's that's a helpful thing, I think, for some, because I know for many people who start out, say, on the apologetic journey, or someone, they get into one particular strand of Christian life. Okay, and I'm animated, my curiosity is around, I'd say the problem of suffering, and I read every book, and and then they get tormented because in the process of seeking the one thing or the tree, they've lost the forest.
Mm-hmm.
And that ability to keep the whole things together. So we are not advocating like a blind trust and then switch off questions. We're asking, engage with life as we get it, intellectually, experientially, theologically, biblically, philosophically. But the picture coheres because it's all held in the present. So this prayer in all these things is not antithetical. It's all part of the knowing journey.
That's correct. So that the whole, as we look at our spirit and we're looking at our inner self and we're committing ourselves to what God's revealed, all we're doing really is to respond accordingly and say, God, you know, but I can trust you even though I don't know what the outcome would be. So I'm going to then give those things, and with thanksgiving, because you will redeem what you allow. I'm going to give it back to you, and I can choose gratitude and contentment rather than feel them. They become choices because I'm choosing to trust in him. So to let your requests be made known to God, give it back to him. And every time I feel a moral or a sense of emotional burden, then it's a revelation that I'm bearing something again that I can't change. You see, anxiety doesn't change. It's unbiblical and it's unproductive. And so it won't make anything
and yet
better.
it's wired into us. So
Yeah,
often, is it then also like how the cross and the crucifixion, that the crucifixion narrative, the pattern of the cross is very helpful for a Christian facing darkness? Because, I mean, if we look at Jesus, his death on Good Friday, the whole Saturday, post execution, and then the resurrection. And in a way, that's a paradigm of life, isn't it? That there are often days where, the lights go out, there's darkness, then you're in that period post-darkness, something bad has happened to me, and we're waiting constantly for resurrection. But we can only wait for it if there is something in reality.
There has to be something that conforms
to that, that comports that there is resurrecting power.
And here is one who has, in fact, demonstrated his life and his sacrifice and been displayed as who he claims to be by the resurrection from the dead. So it's a faith founded on fact. There's no question about that. So now the question is, how do I respond? And do I respond by taking what I do not know to the one who does, and then receiving that back as a gift of peace because I'm leaving it with you? You can carry that. And the more I do that, the less I have to be anxious, because I use my emotions as a diagnostic tool to tell me if I'm not thinking correctly.
Oh, tell me about that.
Yeah, I think of a diagnostic tool. Why are you depressed? Why are you in despair? Why are you doubting? Why are you disappointed? And so it's almost like David saying, why are you upset, overturned, cast down, O my soul? So I meant, again, not to squelch the emotion, but to realize they're revealing some bad thinking that I grabbed back onto something that it was never meant to be a thing for me to carry.
So, but don't you think that many people today were almost trained to glory in or get lost in the emotion?
I'm afraid so.
I mean, I'm looking at these. We just had the terrible hurricane, and thousands of people, damn, their houses destroyed, and more than 80 odd killed or whatever. But I mean, it's awful. But oftentimes I can't understand how reporters do this. They come up to someone who's maybe lost a friend or they've lost their and how do you feel? I mean,
they always ask that question. How do you feel?
It's
really a psychic voyeurism. It's using just as an excuse just to almost try to pretend that we have some more concern than we really do. It's a dangerous question.
And that's not a question that the Bible asks. Is it?
No,
It's not a question
how
that
do you feel?
God doesn't come to us and say, "How do you feel?"
How do you respond to what you've been given? And so if the response is not fear but faith. It is not actually my emotions, but the truth. And so then how do I orient myself? And that's when I really discovered that I'm moving from the heart to the head when I'm looking at Philippians 4:6-7, because when I add verse 8, my word, the things that you've heard and seen. I mean, I love this imagery that we have. Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is of lovely, of good repute. If there's anything excellent and worthy of praise, then what's the command? It's not an invitation to just maybe. It's a command. Think on these things. Dwell on these things. Which means then this was a real breakthrough for me, moving from the heart to the head. Now what am I filling my mind with? My mind. And so if it's going to affect my whole being. So if I'm going to be choosing what's honorable and right and pure, lovely, good repute, excellent, worthy of praise, I've just described the opposite of the news.
Exactly, Ken. Stay there for a minute, because to me, we've talked, and I think in several of the prior episodes, we were talking about this, the war for attention. And how this is all what media and social media, but any advertising, selling, anybody trying to, politicians, ourselves, in the sense, anybody communicating is trying to get someone's attention. So that, the moral value of attention, and here in that Philippians passage, if I, through a victim narrative and through being self-absorbed by narcissistic personality, I want to keep talking about my pain. So I go on social media and I cast out to all my friends, and they're all oohing and eyeing about my pain. And then we're adding on to it and they're amplifying it. And then this great big pain narrative. But all we're doing is dwelling in pain.
You're dwelling in pain and dwelling on that which is not true, right, honorable and lovely and pure and of good repute. So a choice, attention is a choice. It is the idea of a moral act. And so what do I attend to? So if I attend to what's good and right and pure and lovely and of good repute, what's excellent, worthy of praise, clearly, and we're commanded to do this, isn't just a suggestion. That means then I have to ask myself this question of what am I filling my head with? So I'm going from the heart to the head. What am I chewing on, thinking, because it's going to affect my responses to the world?
So you're saying that, again, I think many people, being psychologized makes you feel you don't have choices. Being psychologized, I think, makes us feel, oh, I woke up and I'm feeling depressed, I'm feeling discouraged, so I have no choices because I don't feel like doing it. I don't want to read my Bible.
Right.
I don't want to pray. I don't want to go to church. I don't want to be with my friends. I don't want to do this because but just be honest about your feelings.
Yeah.
You're saying we have a choice?
We have a choice. And that's the most awesome thing about what the scriptures give us is response ability. We have the ability to respond to the circumstances. So we're not defined by the circumstances, but what we do with them. And that's a moral choice of how we attend. So do I attend to the God who is bigger than my circumstances? And then do I renew my mind with the truths about that one in this next command of whatever is true and right and lovely? So where am I really renewing my mind? What am I chewing on?
You know, our kids were small, I remember Mary would tell me once, we were in Vienna, and the kids, often would get into arguments or things. And sometimes there was a process, and I don't know why this was in my mind, but I remember getting out a piece of paper and drawing this, and it was like stairs, and we talked about taking stairs down into the basement. And then, you get to this point where it was often a conflict, or you just keep going deeper down into darkness, or you can make that choice. And at that point, I remember drawing a cross and then putting the stairs up. It's like coming to that point of repentance where you say, okay, it's, I've done wrong. I need to forgive, or I need to put this beside me, and then walking back up the stairs. And the kids got it at the time because it was just, they were young minds, but I often thought that what I think modern culture seems to do is walk us down the steps, but it goes into a black hole and you keep going down the steps. Right. There isn't anything to bridge to get other than an exhortation of, change the White House, get rid of these bums, clean up this or that, or, whatever. But they're platitudes. They're not actually viable options for spiritual health.
No, we have a bigger option and a bigger command to set your mind on the things above where Christ is seated at the right hand of God, not on the things that are on earth. It doesn't mean you're not aware of what's happening in the world, but it means this, that your thoughts and your attentions are to the realization that you are headed for home and that you are in a soul-forming world. And knowing this then, that God's taking you to a place in his own purposes that you will not understand. But then every day when I have this encounter, I have to choose who's in control, me or God. And then when I release that control to the one who only is in control, it then is giving it to him, because you are not meant to bear that burden. But now replace the wrong thinking with the right thinking. And so, again, we've talked about this before. It's not a question of extinction, but replacement with a better good, the expulsive power of a new affection. So given that idea, what is the things that's true and right and honorable? So instead of wringing my hands in despair, I focus on what's true and what's beautiful and what's good. And this is God to define that for me. But I have to give attention to it, or it will not be a motivating thing in my thinking.
Well, I think the next part of our discussion should look at the overlap between time and eternity, because I think that how those interplay, because let's face it, as a Christian, you come, I came from an atheist background, and, I didn't believe there was a God, and I'd lived, 20 odd years or 20 years or so, believing there wasn't a God. Although there was something spiritual, I couldn't get it. But once I came to the knowledge of God, everything was reframed. And now the same decisions, life had to be faced under the auspices of awareness of the presence of God, the reality of sin, spiritual warfare, but a journey and a narrative and commands and a narrative to follow, which recalibrates everything.
Everything matters. And so this is one of the ways I put it in Conformed with His Image. When I talk about holistic spirituality, I'm saying every facet of life under the lordship of Christ, so that he's the hub of the wheel. And then that means then that there's no trivial things, that there's no small thing in my life, no small person, no small situation, no small place, but that everything can become the stuff of glory if I give it to him and offer it to him with gratitude. And so I receive it as from him, and then respond accordingly. And then I practice, which was, by the way, the third part in verse 9, the things you've heard and seen and learned and seen in me. Practice these things, which means it's now to the hands. So it's not just your thinking, you're putting it in practice. You're making choices, you're taking action.
Your life has a pattern.
Has a pattern. You begin to develop momentum,
A way of
and you
existence.
also mark certain moments in your encounters with God, and you've made an Ebenezer, a stone of remembrance where you have that place. He met me here, and I moved from anxiety to peace here.
And this is how I live.
This is how I choose to live.
Well, I think we should come back in our
We should
next
come
talk
back.
and let's talk about eternity and time.
Sounds like a wonderful topic. It's
Look forward to it.
boundless possibilities.
Amen.
God bless.
God bless you.